Hello everyone. Today we're going to take a look at the Italian game Knight's Attack and mostly going to focus on the moves 8, Queen f3 and Bishop d3. So let's start. We're starting with the e4, e5. As always, white and black are starting with a king's pawn, Knight f3 targeting the pawn on e5, and white is defending and black is defending on e5. Bishop c4 is coming, which is showing us that it's going to be an Italian game. Which variations we don't know yet, but here we go for knight f6. And in this position, of course, there are a few moves white could play. We're looking today at knight g5, the most aggressive way of how white can continue. First of all, targeting the pawn on f7 and using the fact that our queen cannot take the knight on g5 due to this knight f6 developing move. So here d5 is pretty much the only way for black, and everything is forced. And yeah, here we already have some ideas how to continue, but for example, if we would take on d5, then there would be a problem with f7, and knight f7 could be a move. So that is actually the fried lever attack, and we're going for knight a5, the Polaria defense, targeting the bishop and already asking a question to white: what does white want to do? And bishop b5 is a move which white should go for. And here we go for c6, blocking the check and attacking the bishop at the same time. So white is grabbing a pawn on c6. And yeah, we already have like white took the pawn on d5, now it takes a pawn on c6. Now we're taking back finally on c6 and also attacking the bishop. And here there are already few options for white how to go. In one chapter, we have a bishop coming to e2. Here we are going to look at all the rest variations and, okay, mostly focusing on bishop d3, it's a main line, and queen f3. But also move like bishop a4 is possible, right? But of course, it's simply just not good. Basically, yeah, the point is that bishop wants to stay on this diagonal, but there is not much reason for that, because normally if you want to try to take pawn on c6, you have to try to do it immediately with moves such as queen f3, but bringing the bishop back to a4 here doesn't make so much sense. And if white is playing a bit dubious, and okay, bishop a4 is rather already a mistake, then we can get very ambitious, because after h6, again, we're always, as always, we're targeting the knight. We're using the stamp piece to attack the knight. Knight goes back to f3, we attack it again with e4. In case of queen e5, the problem is that after queen d4, the double attack, and we're just going to win a piece. In case of bishop c6, knight c6, queen c5. And in case of knight c6, then just queen a4. So knight g1 is very, very strange move, just going back. I mean, the only thing is missing is a bishop from f1 to make the position ideal. So here we go for bishop c5. We don't know yet what white wants to do, but it's clear that almost all the pieces are standing on the back rank, and it's going to be very difficult for white to continue the development. Meanwhile, we have already 3 pieces out, even though the knight on a5 is not the best piece probably, but of course it's restricting the bishop from a4. For example, after knight a2, we have already knight g4, and we have the same attack like white wanted to do, but in this case already the d5 is not going to bring such, the d4 isn't going to bring power due to the move e takes on d3, and then white is in trouble. So queen e2 is possible, but of course we are playing e6, bishop e6. We are breaking this pin on our king, and again attacking the knight on f3. So now knight comes to e5, and yeah, it's also very important, actually, yes, a very important moment, because here we could have developed the bishop to e7 and then castled. But the problem here is that we're going to see some lines in a few moves, and we will understand that bishop on e7 would not really fit to those lines. So, for example, after knight e5, queen d4, now we're attacking the bishop and the knight. Bishop c6, knight takes. And the point is that in case of knight takes, queen c5, and basically if bishop would be on e7, then knight could take it. But now knight cannot, so queen a6, bishop c8, queen a4, and now bishop d7, we are going to win the material. In case white goes queen b5, trying to pin our knight, the king. Here we go bishop c5, intermediate move, attacking both knight and the pawn on f2. Queen takes on c6 with a check, king e7. Now queen b7 check, king d6. Now, of course, queen c6 check doesn't work because knight is hanging on e5. So in case of, for example, castle, we just take with a king on e5. We're playing king of the field, and we are up a piece, by the way. So knight f7 is the question, but then after bishop takes castle and bishop goes back to d5. Even though our king is in the center, our other pieces are also in the center, and our king is fully defended by those pieces, while white has only one queen out. And okay, let's not forget that we are up a piece for 3 pawns, but due to the piece activity, we are just crushing. So that was the bishop a4 move, which is of course very strange and dubious. Queen f3. The idea of queen f3 is to pin this pawn to a rook so that we cannot really capture the bishop on b5. And we react to this pretty normally. We place the rook to b8. So now we again create a threat to take with the bishop, to take the bishop, but also we create another idea, potentially joining the game with the rook on the 6th or 5th or 4th rank. So let's see what white will do. There are a few moves again with the bishop, which white can do, and also white could take a pawn. So let's start with bishop a4. Again, moving back the bishop. Well, this is pretty bad again. Like if you take on c6, then of course you should take it. You shouldn't just move back. Doesn't really make sense. So it's rather already better to take on c6, even though take is not so good as well. But because now we have rook b4 targeting the bishop, and at the same time we are controlling the whole 4th rank, which is a pretty important because we will have some ideas on this rank. I mean, we'll have ideas like playing f5, bishop g4, maybe rook at some moment somewhere comes to in the 4th rank. So knight c3, we go h6 now, attacking the knight. That's what we always do. After all this is under control on the queen side, then we attack the knight. Knight goes back to h3, and now bishop c5, developing the bishop, developing all the pieces. a3, white is trying to kick our rooks. We go to g4 now. On g4, it again cannot be kicked because there is no h3, neither h3 nor f3 is possible. So if b4, white is trying to win material, we have e4 attack on the queen, queen e2, and now rook g2 with the threat of taking the knight on h3, which is not so clear actually where to go on which square. And yeah, also bishop g4 is coming. The position is getting slowly worse and worse for white, and according to the computer, it's already lost. So bishop c6. Sorry, yeah, the bishop c6. Taking the pawn, but of course, like if you wanted to take a pawn, it should be better to take it immediately, not a few moves later. So we go for king f8, and now we are threatening to go for bishop d4 and take the knight on c3 to follow it up with the e4 move. Also, we have ideas to bring the rook back to g6 with a threat of bishop g4 attacking the queen as well, trying also to trap it. So yeah, very, very, very interesting ideas which we have, and very different. So now bishop c6. Yeah, taking is also not very good, but maybe at least it's slightly better because you're already clarifying the situation. But after knight c6, queen takes, there is a very strong move here, knight d7. So first of all, stopping the check, and secondly, opening the attack with the queen on knight on g5. So knight could go back on f3. Here we have rook b6. That's why our rook is so active. It's immediately attacking the queen and ready to jump anywhere, for example, on g6 square to target the king side. So yeah, many ideas for our rook. Queen a4, let's say, is being played. Now we have knight rook b4 attacking the queen again. Queen a7, trying to be greedy and taking the pawn, but of course, like, you cannot be greedy too much because in this position, bishop c5 and queen is already in trouble. There are no real squares. So queen a8, and now after e4, basically we already in a way almost trapping it. I mean, of course, there is still a d5 and c6 squares, but very suspicious position because bishop b7 is a threat, and there are no real moves for the queen. Knight is under attack, so yeah. Okay. Also, we have a queen for now here, but generally it's very tough right now for white to be under such huge pressure only for a couple of pawns. All right, then we continue with the queen e4 move. So white is not going for this material, not going for the a7 pawn, but currently white is up 2 pawns. So bishop e7, we're continuing our development, castle, and now bishop e7 attacking the queen. In the next move, we're going to castle, and we can push for the f5, bring the rook to g6, attacking the king on the king side and g2 square. So yeah, definitely we're going to use our bishop on this diagonal, amazing bishop, which is going to attack, and white is having issues with development on the queen side till now. In case of d4, white is trying to open up and first of all develop the knight with a bishop. Sorry, defend the knight with the bishop by playing this d4 move, and also opening up a little bit. So yeah. But we shouldn't really take the pawn, because the problem is after taking the d4 pawn, after castle, that's, I mean, very clear position because we have king in the center, even though pieces are not developed yet, but they can be developed in a couple of moves. While we still need time to finish our development with our king and put it to the castle. So we have to play bishop e7. We are continuing development and targeting the knight, attacking it. So knight goes back to f3. Now again, rook b6 attacking the queen. Queen a4, now castle. Now we're just fully developed, and we are ready to put our bishop to b7, rook to g6, and so on. So castle, bishop b7, now knight takes, the pawn on e5, knight takes, pawn takes, and rook g6. Big threat already on g2, f3 is the only move, but here there is a very nice trick. Bishop takes f3, rook takes, and after queen d1 we're going to win a lot of material with a bishop c5 checks. d3. After d3, white is basically defending the knight without playing d4, without being too aggressive or taking on e5, and also controls the e4 square, so probably a bit better. Now we go for bishop e7 with the same idea, attacking the knight, so knight f3. Now we're castle, and here there are a few moves. For example, if white is also castling, we go for knight c5, and already we create a threat to trap the queen. There are no squares for the queen actually in this position, so for that not to happen, I actually don't know how to stop it. But for example, after knight e5, bishop b7, queen b5, bishop takes on b2, takes on g2, and yeah, there are big issues for white. They're losing material. So let's look at knight c3. Knight c3 is also possible. Here we have rook b6, again attacking the queen. Queen e4, and after bishop b7, queen e2, f5. We're having all the pieces out, and we're having a very nice development as well as the center. And it's a huge compensation for all the pawns, and even computer is saying that it's clearly better for black. So it's working out. So queen e4 is just removing the queen, so taking 2 pawns and coming back. Now f5, we're attacking the queen, queen e2, and now e4. We're just trying to open up the position fully, open up all our files against white. So for example, after d takes e4, pawn takes, there is knight d4 move. So now we go for queen b6. And after queen e4, we have bishop c5, and well, okay, the bishop cannot be developed from c1 because b2 is hanging. We're attacking the knight, we're attacking the pawn on f2, and yeah, this is just looking like a winning position completely for black. In case of knight coming to e4, then we go rook b6, first attacking the queen, and yeah, even though the knight on e4 is looking more beautiful, but it's standing in the way of the f pawn. So here, for example, if queen goes to c4, we're going to play bishop a6, target the queen, so maybe it's not the best place. Now queen a4. And after f5, we're going to continue with the castle. And again, we have all this piece activity as a huge compensation and definitely better position. So queen goes to a4 makes more sense, not to allow this bishop a6 tempo. Now f5, we're attacking the knight on e4, knight g3, and castle. So now in this position, we already have threats like bringing the bishop out to b7 to work on this diagonal, especially controlling the g2 square, and also bringing the rook to the g6. We can also bring the king to them to h8 as a prophylactical move, so there are no checks. Our knight could jump to c5, targeting the queen. So there are definitely many moves for black in this position. So the other move which we can look at, it's bishop e2, so bringing bishop back. But looking at the pieces, the position of the pieces is very funny because, okay, probably white would prefer to have knight on f3 and queen on d1, but then e4 is coming. So it's very difficult to say how white would prefer this position, but this is definitely a very funny situation with all the pieces standing there. We go with a bishop to e7, we're just developing, and also potential at some moment there could be some threat against this knight. So now the question is how to finish the development for white. White can start like with playing something like knight c3, but then after castle, we have knight d5 with an attack. For example, now if knight goes to e4, already there could be an idea to push f5 and e4. So let's say queen goes to d3. Now we play queen c7. We don't read queens, obviously. We don't go into endgame. Knight g to e4, and then after knight e8, again, we have threats of f5 and e4 incoming. If d3, white is trying to stop the ideas of pushing e4, then we have an idea of going for rook b6, because if you go knight d5 in this position, attacking the knight on g5, unfortunately after queen h5 we will have to weaken the queen side. So rook b6, castle, and now c5. Now we're opening for us the way for the rook, and also we're opening this diagonal for the bishop. Knight g4, and now king h8. So and also this c5 move is pretty typical because we are opening the square for the knight to come to d4 in this case. So this c5 move is opening up many opportunities for the bishop, for the rook, and for the knight. That was knight c3, castle, and now basically we have the f7 square all protected. We're having the ideas of jumping with knight to d5 and coming with a pawn to f5 as before. So after knight e4, now white is going for knight e4, but now we have the knight d5 move with a threat of f5. The good thing is that our bishop is standing on e7 and not on d6, where it would be under attack by the knight. So let's say d3, now f5 we can go already, knight e to c3, and now we can even go with g5. Since after knight takes, pawn takes, we're getting such a nice pawns which are rolling all over white's position, and yeah, we have a clearly better position here, and we're ready to run with our pawns, bring the knight to c6, bishop to e6. Our rook can go either in the 6th rank or in the 4th rank. Yeah, so definitely we are doing so well. Queen d3 is the correct move, which is stopping the knight d5. Because our knight has to defend the h7 square. But we, of course, don't want to trade the queen, so we move away with queen c7. Now knight c3 is coming, and now after h6, attacking the knight, after knight comes to e4. Here is pretty important position, and generally, so normally we want to try to take on e4, and then to follow it up with f5. But in this case, since we're going to help white in a way, because then after we take, then the queen will take, and then we will help white to develop in this case. But here, we can just move the knight away. Of course, moving on d5 would not be possible. On d7, we would block our bishop. e8 looks a bit strange. And okay, basically out of all squares, knight h7 looks the most normal, and then we go for the f5 break, f5 and e4 break. So black's position is very, very good, and definitely like there is a compensation for the pawn. In case of d3, it would just lose on spot, because after bishop g4, queen e3, knight d5, we're just winning a piece, so it's not working. Knight c3 is the main move. Here we go for knight d5. So that's basically the engine move, so it's not so easy also to find. So now knight d5, with the idea, of course, to take on g5 and go for f5 and e4. If knight goes back to e4, then of course it's just helping us to push with f5. Knight goes back and e4, and yeah, we're just already winning material. So let's say knight h3, not to allow this f5 come with a tempo. Here we go for rook b4, and our rook is working on the 4th rank, and we could bring it to the h4 or play f5 and bring the rook to the g4. But okay, generally h4 probably would be the square to go. That was a castle. In case of knight e4, this is actually looking at this move, it is actually already the correspondence chess territory, so we can already understand and see that how difficult these moves are to play in the over the board, like real-time control tournament. And yeah, basically, yeah, it's not easy at all. So here, for example, the move knight to d5 would similarly work here with the idea of f5 and e4, but the problem is that there is a trick. White could go for d4, since after f5 knight comes to c3, and after e4 queen g3, targeting both our rook and the pawn on g7, and we're just going to lose the pawn. So yeah, it's not really working. So we got to take on e4, and yeah, just after queen e4 castle. In case white goes for knight c3, for example, we go rook b4, again attacking the queen. We're using some tempos. Queen e3, and okay, here bishop b7 is also interesting, because we can play c4, c5, bring the knight to d4, the rook can come to h4, f5 can be played, f5, f4, or everything. So and in case we want to go for knight b7, then after a3 we play rook d4, and d3, knight d6. If queen takes on e5, we're kind of giving up the pawn, but we have knight f5, and we are defending the rook, and we maneuver the knight to a very nice square on f5. And here after bishop f3, we have rook h4, and basically knight is coming to the d4 square. And yeah, it's still, I mean, the big compensation. We have always like the bishop's moves. We can attack white the way we want. And if white goes for castle, we have knight f5, queen d2, c5, queen d1, and now knight h4. So yeah, we're just building up pressure on the king side, and white had to bring the queen all the way back to d1 in order to develop the bishop from c1. So yeah, very strange position for white. So castle looks very normal. Here we go rook d4, rook b4 attacking the queen, and yeah, definitely it's a topical idea in this chapter that we always have this rook d4, or very often at least. If queen takes on e5, well, after bishop d6, queen c3, and rook e8, there are going to be very a lot of issues, because after rook h4, the attack on the pawn on h2 is going to be enormous. So for example, the bishop d1, rook h4, g3, and now bishop h3. White cannot really take, because actually maybe white can take, but okay, we can take, and there looks like it's going to be a checkmate on g2, so it's not really working out. Queen goes to e3, then we go f5, and then there is a threat of f4, even though the queen is not on f3, where the threat was e4. Now we have a threat f4. So d3, trying to finish the development. Now f4, queen d2, and now f3. We are creating a lot of weaknesses on the king side, and after logical bishop f3, we're just sacrificing a whole exchange, and queen is entering the position on h5 or most likely h5 because g6 would just help white, so we have to go for the h5 and rook h4 squares. And yeah, big attack. Of course, there is a big compensation for it since all the pieces are still on the queen side for white, waiting and doing nothing. So our bishops and rook and queen could do some miracles. So bishop goes to d3. This is the main move of this queen f3 line. And in case of the trade on e4, the idea is to take back with the bishop so that square on f4 is being protected. We go bishop d6. First of all, we're just developing the bishop. Second, we're preparing the castle, but also we're targeting the g3 square where queen normally is going for. So that's the idea behind this move. In case white castles, we're just having bishop g4, attacking the queen, and yeah, now queen has to go somewhere. And the problem is that g3 is not really good because of this bishop, because of this x-ray. So in case of queen s3, we go for knight d5, targeting the queen again, queen g3, and f5. We're just going for it. We're not even taking the knight, but f5 is much stronger. After f3, we have e4, queen h5, queen h4, with already some threats. White is trying, but after h6, fg, we castle short. We are ready to take on g5. We're ready to take on d3, and yeah, we're just much better, even already winning, I guess, according to computer. So queen g3, trying to put the queen there, but okay, there are issues with this bishop. So now e4, we can already go for and attack the queen. Now queen has to go back to e3, and yeah, we are just castling. Of course, the take on d3 was not possible due to the pin. So now castle has to happen. It's taking on e4 is a bit risky, but okay, if white is not taking, basically we're already having such a beautiful pawn on e4. So bishop e4, white is trying h6, kicking out the knight f3, rook e8, d3, knight d5, queen d4, knight b4, and basically now c2 is hanging, and yeah, also f4, f5 is incoming. The bishop is in trouble, so on e4. If knight takes on e4, we take, and if bishop takes on e4, we have rook e8, pinning the bishop to a queen. After h3, we have bishop h5, and basically a5 is unavoidable, and if queen goes to d3, then there is a rook b4. So yeah, this is very tough. And okay, in case queen takes, which looks very logical, the most logical, targeting the h7 square and the bishop, but there comes f5, attacking and defending at the same time. So queen e6 check. Now king goes to h8, and basically the queen is a bit awkward there. It's very close to be trapped. So after a move for rook e8, actually there's only one square for the queen, but it's going to be trapped by the other rook. So yeah, the queen is almost trapped. The position is absolutely awful for white. So we are winning this one. Knight c3. It's actually the most common move in the position, but it already brings us so much advantage. We go for bishop g4 as planned, targeting the queen. Now queen has to go. Queen goes to g3, then there is again e4, queen e3, castle. And after bishop e2, we have rook e8. Defending the pawn is threatening to go for h6, targeting the knight. And yeah, basically cannot really take on e4 and cannot do much about that. So if knight takes on e4, we have again rook e8 with the idea of taking on e4 and pushing for f5. f3, white is trying to defend, so here we go for knight d5, attacking, and the idea is if white is taking on d5, we're taking with a d pawn. So if knight takes cd happens, fg, taking our bishop, we take back the knight, bishop e2, and now rook c8. Now we're preparing bishop coming to c5, and of course white cannot really castle. So c3, now bishop c5, and queen f4. With the knight at c6, we're cutting the queen to castle, so there is no opportunity for castle anymore, and knight is coming to e4, and okay, potentially also d3. Our queen is coming to the game, and yeah, we're just having a great position, and black is very close to winning this game. In case queen takes on a7, well, we have f5 targeting the knight, fg, fe, and after knight e4 we have rook b7 attacking the queen, at the same time threatening to go with the rook to b4, with the rook to f7, and I would say also the probably e7 attacking the knight and bringing the knight back to f6, attacking the knight on e5. So many ideas here for black. The position is pretty bad here for white. Queen f2, white is trying to bring the queen away, not to be too greedy and not take also the knight on d5. So here f5 is the main problem. f5 attacking the knight on e4, and of course the rook is pinning the knight to the king. So after white is deciding to take our bishop on g4, we take the knight obviously. And after bishop e2, we have rook f8. And basically, white cannot castle anymore because we stop the castling attack. And yeah, the next moves are going to be knight f4 and knight b4 to attack white position. If knight takes on e4 here, we have just knight f6. And yeah, white is in a big trouble. We have also rook b4 later. So yeah, we're just taking the piece. So that was queen g3. In case of queen e3, then we have knight d5 immediately, attacking the queen, also threatening to trade, and attacking the knight on g5 at the same time. Queen goes to g3. I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black. It actually feels like a blunder, but it's not such a blunder, because if we take on g5, we take the knight on g5, knight e4, queen e7, and after knight takes, queen g4, white is actually much better in this position because white managed to trade all of our active pieces, and we are left with a knight on a4, which is knight on a5, which is not so good, and knight on d5, but all the rest of the pieces are gone. We cannot really attack. So we have to play a5. We have to keep our pieces, and now we create still a threat of taking the knight on g5. If knight takes on d5, we take cd, bishop e2, and now e4. We are rolling forward with the pawns and also attacking the queen on g3. Queen h4 the only way. Now we take on e2, king e2, and queen f6 with the idea of pushing h6 in this position so that there is no queen h5 check due to the g6. So what happens in case of knight g4? Well, then we just take on e4, knight takes, and now we go bishop e6. So queen g7, rook g8, and yeah, we're just much better here. We are having a piece for 3 pawns, but since white has issues with developing of the pieces of the queen side and the king is still in the center and our pieces are so active, we're definitely crushing. Knight goes to e6, targeting our queen. Well, we have to move to f6. Now the knight is kind of trapped on e6. There is no way to go for it. Knight takes on g7, we take. Bishop f5 using the fact of the spin, but now after rook g8, basically we defend everything. Now we threaten to take on f5 as well. And yeah, even though there are 3 pawns for a piece, it's actually so much better for black that it's going to be tough to claim this. To claim the compensation for white. If knight takes on d5 here, we take, and now, okay, the pieces are again standing all together. The bishop is on the way of other bishop to being developed. The queen is awkward on e3 with all the upcoming d4 moves. The queen has to defend the knights, but knight doesn't really have squares, so it's, yeah, very strange position, while we have this very nice center in the position. And yeah, here if white goes f4, trying to somehow break our center, we go for e4, and yeah. I mean, there are no real squares even for the bishop, and we're ready to castle and finish the development. And at some moment, there could be even bishop c5 later in the game, so castling would not be so easy. So if white goes for castle here, trying to immediately finish the development with castling after h6, knight f3, we go knight c6, going for castling in the next move. Of course, we had to defend the pawn on e5. And yeah, we're just going to start pushing the pawns, like with f5, and we'll see like e4 or f4 and so on. So if queen a7, if white is being a bit more greedy and also attacking the f7 square, here if we just castle, which feels very logical, defending the pawn on f7, after bishop h7, king h8, knight f7, rook f7, queen f7, king h7, queen d5. We're just, we're going to have 2 pieces for rook, but we will have just 3 pawns, and white will have 4 pawns. It's just too much for white, and we cannot attack white. So we should play bishop e7. First of all, we're stopping the queen f7 ideas, and secondly, we are attacking the knight on g5. So knight has to go back, knight f3, and now e4, the fork is coming. Knight e5 is attacking our bishop on on g5, on g4, so bishop e6 has to be played, now bishop e2, and now bishop d6, attacking the knight, and it looks like that knight is almost trapped, and just most likely to be done. And yeah, we're just winning this game. So that was knight c3. In case of h3, which is very logical, stop us from playing bishop g4. Here we go castle, and we already have some more time because white spent this time on h3, and we have already threats in the position to go for h6, remove the knight from f6, and push for the f5. So if white is castling, we go h6, knight e4. Now we take, queen takes, and we play f5. Now we want this position. It's very bad for white because after queen goes back to e1, because where else queen can go? Like here, there's going to be a immediate fork. So queen e1, now e4, attacking the bishop on d3, bishop e2, and now bishop c7 now. And in the next move, we're threatening to go with a queen to d6, where white has some weak dark squares, and our bishops are looking at the king side. Our pawns are like very much advanced in the center, and for that we have more space advantage and general just advantage, and all of it just for one pawn is just enormous advantage, and computer is already saying position is lost for white. Knight goes to c3, it's actually the strong move, so now we go for bishop e7 here. Why? Okay, first it looks like very, very deep move, but okay, it's actually, we are removing the bishop from the knight coming to e4 and challenging our bishop. So here, if white is going b3, we go for rook b4, and after bishop a3, e4 we have already, and knight c4, rook e4, knight e4, and bishop a3. We're going just to have 2 pieces for a rook in the endgame with some initiative. It's tough to say because white has also 2 pawns, so we have to try to attack there, so it's definitely possible. If white is castling, then we go for h6, again kicking out the knight. Now knight goes to e4, and we go with a knight to h7, similar like in the previous line. So if here we would like to take on e4, but if we take on e4, then queen would take and threatens first of all checkmate, and secondly attacking the pawn on e5. So that would be pretty bad. So here knight h7 we go for, and we are ready to push forward with the f5 move. So here knight g3, knight is going away, knight g5, attacking the queen, queen e3, and now f5. f4, and after e4, fg, bishop takes, now queen takes on a7, attacking the queen, rook b8, queen c5, we take the bishop, and after b4, bishop f6, we're basically getting all the activity of the pieces. Bishop still not out for white, and already we're becoming closer, like getting closer to take some pawn, like maybe we can take the pawn even on c2. But yeah, definitely for now, I mean, definitely there are a lot of problems, and many threats in the position. So it's pretty difficult for white to hold, but okay, it's still not lost, but clearly better for black. That was the h3 move. Now we go into the knight e4. Basically, the main point of it that now bishop g4 is not a move, since there is knight takes on f6 with the check. So knight takes on e4, bishop takes, and white is stopping the f5 ideas. Now we castle, and now we're threatening f5 finally. It's a big threat. If white is castling short, then we go for f5, bishop c6. Now we take, queen takes, and rook b4 with the idea of bishop b7, and the queen, okay, it's not trapped, but almost trapped, and we're just ready to bring our bishop on this long a8, h1 diagonal, targeting the pawn on g2 and the king side completely. So bishop f5 is another move, trying to physically stop the f5, but here we have e4 intermediate move, targeting the queen, queen h3, and after bishop f5, queen f5, c5, our knight is already ready to jump to d4, while white's queen side is just standing back still. If white is going for g4, trying to stop the f5 ideas by that move, then we are going for knight b7. And since, okay, our knight was really doing nothing, now we're bringing it back to the game, and we're going with the knight to the d6. Because first we play bishop c5, removing the bishop from the d6 square from the knight, and also we're also putting this bishop on this very good diagonal of a7 to g1. So after b3, we're going knight d6. Now we're attacking the bishop b2, and bishop d4 now, pinning this knight so knight cannot really jump too far. Long castle and bishop e6. So here white went for the plan of the long castling long side, but of course we're still having a lot of semi-open files and ideas of pushing the pawns in front of the king, I mean towards the king rather. And yeah, I mean, position of course is around equal, but it took a lot of important, or like almost the only moves from white to get to this position, and still it is more comfortable for black because of this attack which is incoming, pushing the c pawn to c4 and just creating an attack. Queen a4, queen a5, and other rook to the c8 is coming, so pretty tough for white to defend. Bishop goes to f5. Wait, white here stops bishop g4 physically with the other bishop, but of course there are too many moves with the pieces, so we play h6. Now we don't need to take on f5 for that. We are targeting the knight on h6. That was our plan all the way. If knight goes to e4, this is already very similar to this knight comes to e4. Here we take. If queen takes, then it's going to lose material. After rook b4, there is not so many squares where queen can defend the bishop on f5. So, for example, after after queen f3, we just can play rook f4 and just win a piece. If queen goes to d3, then we go for rook d4, and after queen h3, we go for queen h4, and yeah, basically we can agree to a draw. But after e4, bishop e4, queen e7, we're just pinning the bishop, and it's under big attack, since after knight c3 we have just f5 and the bishop is gone. So that was it. So now if bishop takes on e4, then after castle g4, again white is trying to stop the f5 ideas. Knight b7, again we have an idea of bringing the bishop to c5, knight comes to the d6 square, and we're just having full compensation for the pawn. The bishop takes on c8 first as intermediate move. Of course, we take the knight on g5, and now the question is where to move the bishop. The bishop goes to a6, and there is e4 immediately attacking the queen, queen e2, and after castle, rook e8 and c5, knight c6 moves, with knight coming most likely to the d4, of course, also possible to the b4 are possible. So bishop goes to f5, g6, we're attacking the bishop, and after bishop d3 we go for g4 and gain a lot of space on the king side, and our rook is super active, just targeting the pawn on h2, and yeah, just having good compensation. Queen e2, king f8, and yeah, we're just playing king f8 because we don't want to remove the rook from the h8. We can castle by putting the king to g7 if we want. So our knight can go via c6, we are c6 to d4 after pushing c5. So yeah, definitely a compensation for the pawn is there. Very hard defense from white. The bishop d3 is actually the main line nowadays, and basically the most challenging way of continuation and this variation. So it looks like on the one hand the bishop is awkward on d3 because it's stopping the development of the queen side, but it stops our push of e4 so easily. We cannot really go for it, and also supports the knight many times in standing on e4. So this is definitely very, very challenging. So here we are going for knight d5 and attacking on g5 at the same time, using the fact that the bishop cannot easily defend the knight on g5, and now basically the knight has to go or be defended by the pawn. So two most important moves. Of course, we don't look at the knight h3 because it doesn't look good at all, but we look at knight f3, knight e4, and h4. So let's start with knight e4. First of all, it's a bit more risky because we always want to try to push the pawns forward with f5 and e4. And in this case, if knight jumps to e4, we have again this idea of pushing the f5 forward. So it just helps black. If knight goes to, now we go with knight to f4, and now we target the bishop and the pawn at the same time, and basically white has to go back with the bishop in order to defend. If white doesn't and plays queen f3, well, after f5, we're just going to have ideas of e4 after we remove our knight from f4. Very bad square for the queen on f3. If castle happens, then we just take on d3, cd, and bishop e7, and yeah, we just have... There are some similar lines like this, white double the pawns, so now it's going to be more difficult to develop the bishop. Most likely they'll have to try to fianchetto it, but we'll maybe... Okay, we can see if we play f5 or f6, but generally we can easily regain the pawn if we want to. Other than that, we still have a lead in the development. So bishop f1 has to be played, defending the pawn on g2, and here we go for f5, immediately targeting the knight on e4. If knight g3, we have bishop d6 already, and here also the knight on g3, we can see that it stops ideas from white to kick our knight from f4. So now our knight on f4 is going to stand still for some time. So the point is here that in case of bishop c5, let's say, there could be an idea for white to go for c3 with idea of d4. So we're not allowing that, but playing bishop d6 rather. If d4 is played instantly, trying to break everything and using the fact that knight is under attack, we play queen e7, and now we're threatening actually to take. The knight is defended by the bishop, so there is not much of an issue for black, rather for white. Knight e2, white is offering to trade, but it's a very bad move because bishop is just blocking both the queen and the bishop. And even in the next move, for example, after knight e6, if knight is coming to g1, it would be, of course, a very interesting position already. But yeah, of course, d4, white has to continue development. Queen e2, queen e7, sorry, putting an x-ray on the king. And basically now there is a problem of finishing with development for whites due to this knight on e2, which is very awkward. We are ready to castle on the next move and push pawns in front, and this all just for one pawn. Of course, we are already having a big advantage as black. If knight e goes to c3, then we have bishop c5 already. Now c3 and d4 are not possible, so we can go for it. And in case of knight a4, which is targeting our bishop, well, we go for bishop to f2, since after king f2, we have a double attack on the king and the knight on a4. King e1, queen a4, and we could actually already go for the... Sorry. We could actually already go for the queen e4, but of course we can also take the knight on a4 and continue. But yeah, the g3 move is definitely also possible. It's logical, and white doesn't want that we have knight on f4 after queen d4, where we are attacking the pawn on f2. Queen f3 trying to defend, but now after knight e6, we already threatened to go for the e4, challenging the queen. d3, it's better not to allow e4 for white, so castle. If bishop g2, trying to develop and finish the development, now finally we have e4 because of this wonderful rook on f8. Queen e2, and now bishop a6. Now we're pinning everywhere, and the next move we are ready to go for rook a to e8 to put enormous amount of pressure, and all our pieces are working. Of course, it's a huge advantage for black. If bishop goes to e3, then we have queen b4, where we are attacking also the pawn on b2 and defending the bishop still. So bishop takes c5, we take with a knight, and now we're threatening already to go for the f4, break the position of white, take on b2, and there are many other ideas, and our bishop is about to get out to the game. So definitely very tough position for white to defend, and we're clearly better. So d3 is another move. I mean, it's, yeah, basically just wanting to develop the bishop to e3 in case queen comes to d4. So just stopping all this kind of ideas. We go for castle. Now g3, I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black yourself. So I hope you found it. It's rook e8. We're just giving up the knight, but we're opening up the file for the rook. So let's say if white is playing bishop e3, then after bishop d6, we can always recapture, and the bishop will fall on e3. So yeah, in the next move we are ready to bring the rook to b8. We will play c5, knight c6, knight d4, and bishop b7. So we're ready to finish the development like this. If pawn takes on f4, we go for take on f4, and yeah, king is in a bit of trouble. After king d2, there is a very funny checkmate, knight c4. And in case of bishop e2, then we have f3, and after castle, we take knight takes and bishop d6, and yeah, the position is a disaster for white, so we are clearly better. Queen d2 with the idea of take on f4 and bring the king to d1. Pretty awkward, but okay. We can go now here with knight to d5. This is good enough for advantage, but there is also an interesting line, bishop b7. It's a computer's engine's way, but yeah, it shows very well that in which style we can play in this opening. So they take our knight, we play for queen h4, attacking everywhere, putting a lot of pressure. Now this is a threat. Fe, rook e5, king d1, bishop e2. So there are already huge threats of rook coming to e1. Knight e2 trying to stop that. Now knight c4, we sacrifice another piece. Queen c3, and now c5. And yeah, basically we're down the piece in this position, and a lot of pieces are hanging as well, but everything is working according to the engine. In case you don't want to go for this crazy line, then of course you should go for knight d5. This is already good for an advantage for black, and yeah, pretty much always we just want to play against almost any move, just e4. Opening up the position, yeah. And just great position. We have very good pieces, a lot of pieces which are super active, and white has issues in the position. So at least slightly better for black is the position. So in case of h4, trying to defend the knight with the ideas of bringing already the queen in the game, and this is just going to be a pretty much crazy line, and there are already some threats in the position. So first, the idea is to bring the queen to f3 or to h5, and it's not going to be so easy to reply as black. And also taking on h7 could be option at some moment. So here we could go h6, but it's a main line, so after queen h5, queen f6, in case, I mean, there is also, of course, knight e4, and like we have to go for a draw. And in case of knight h7, which is also interesting, rook h7, bishop h7, g6, queen e2, knight f4, queen f3, and h5. Well, it's interesting position, but okay, there is also already like a draw from repetition. So I didn't really like this. And okay, in case of bishop e7, so bishop e7 is a possible move. So here queen f3, and now basically we cannot really protect the pawn on f7. So we have to go f5, and after bishop takes, rook f8 and queen h5, bishop. So we are giving up, but white is giving up the piece for many pawns, and we're getting a completely masked position. yeah, we have something similar in this repertoire in this chapter, something similar, but not so much chaotic as this one. So we go for sorry, f5 is also possible. We don't go for f5, and here white can go just bishop e2, and we cannot really go h6 since there will be always bishop h5. So for that reason, we go here for bishop d6. It was played actually in only one game, almost a novelty. The whole idea is just to be ready for the moves of queen f3 or queen h5. So let's start with queen h5. In case of queen h5, basically without h6, it's not really bringing any stress because after g6, queen f3, we just a short castle. We are ready to go for the f5 and e4 moves. So we're already having slightly better position. In case of knight c3, basically normal developing move, here we have move h6. And this is the whole idea of this bishop d6 move. Now, if knight goes to e4, we have bishop e7. And the idea, of course, we're targeting the pawn on h4 and also threatening to go for f5. Knight goes to g3, now knight f4, attacking the bishop and the pawn at the same time. Bishop e4, castle, and we are ready to face the bishop with the pawn on f4. And basically, if white is going d4, we go f5 already. Bishop f3, knight goes back to g6. We want to push the e4, but our knight was hanging on f4. de, now queen b6, and after castle, knight finally took, so that we didn't take all this time because there was like this rook standing. So now after castle we take, and we're getting a messy position, but definitely we had definitely a counterattack there. We can always bring the knight to the game. We can always try attacking here. There are many ideas for black and okay, for white there are also some ideas, but definitely a big fight is incoming. So with queen h5 going immediately for this, then we go for castle, defending the pawn. And now bishop h7. White has to go for this because otherwise it was just a bad move, bringing the queen to h5. Now knight f7, rook f7, queen f7, king h7, no, knight e4 with a threat of knight g5. Big trick is coming. So we go king h8. We are basically not ready to face after knight to g5 with something like, let's say, queen f6. So yeah, we're not afraid anymore. And materially speaking, we are more or less the same. Yeah, we have two pieces for rook and two pawns, so it's more or less balanced. But okay, we have more chances because of our more active pieces, and the rooks of white are not really working that well. That was knight c3. In case of bishop takes on h7, it's very much, I mean, it looks very strange and tough to believe that it's working, but actually it does. So g6, we are trapping the bishop. And after d3, we have knight f6, attacking the bishop again. So now h5, white wants to open the rook, so we cannot really take on h7 because of the hg. So here, bishop f5, just defending the pawn. It was a bit too early to take on h7. And yeah, so here after queen f3, which is attacking the pawn on c6, we have to go queen e7. The point is that after hg, bishop g6, and bishop d2, we have bishop c7. If we play here e4, which is also interesting, but a bit more crazy. So take knight c4, attacking the bishop and the pawn, and also knight is coming to the e5 square. Queen c3, bishop e4. Now we are opening up the e file. Castle, knight d2, and now bishop b4. Yeah, pretty crazy line. Queen h3. Now we take the knight. Now knight takes our bishop, knight takes, and rook e1. Like everything is pinning. Bishop e1, rook e1, and now rook d8. So we're getting into this crazy position. Like we're up the whole rook, but it's so messy and so unclear what is happening, how is it happening. So yeah, pretty interesting. So here bishop c7 is the yeah, again, it's also the messy position after bishop c7. So after knight c3, for example, that could be a continuation. Knight h7, b4. Now e4 we are breaking and trying to open up the e file. Knight g takes on e4. Now knight b7. Knight isn't coming back to the game. Castle and castle. And yeah, this is a crazy position. Like we have a piece for 3 pawns, but our pawns are located like in a very strange way, so that for white is going to be very difficult. Like if there were like just 2 pawns here, let's say, it would be much easier maybe for white later to create a passer. But since our pawns are like on C, A, and F file, then it's much more difficult. Just like this, but definitely a position for 3 results here. So queen F3 is immediately asking us a question on F7, what to do. So here we go, queen E7. That's the difference basically, that in the bishop E7 lies queen E7 is not going to happen, and we don't have this move. So castle, and now F5, and now it's actually a better version, since now king can go to the D8 square. So after bishop E5, now we have rook F8, queen H5, G6. So we have the similar line, but king goes to D8, and it's much easier for us to play. And again, we have a piece for a few pawns, and actually for 4 pawns, but we're going to attack on the king side. So, and we have many active pieces. So if B3 white is playing, it's basically the only one game, correspondence game, which reaches this position. So yeah, it's definitely saying a lot. And here we have F5, bishop F5, rook F8, again, similar position, G6, bishop G6, and king D8. So basically, white's king is actually better on E1 than the castle short, and potentially later white could castle even long. Knight E4 trying to target our bishop on D6. Now bishop B4, we had to go somewhere. The point is that if we would remove bishop from this diagonal, bishop A3 is coming. Now A3, now bishop F5 comes with a tempo, targeting the queen and the knight. Queen G5, offering a trade, we cannot really say nothing against. Knight B3, after pawn takes, we have bishop E4, so we are taking the knight, and after AB, we have knight A4, knight F4, targeting for D3 and G2 squares. Currently, we're down 3 pawns, but there are many threats in the position, and we are, again, our pieces are super active, so for that reason, we are either going to regain material, or we are going to have an attack and huge compensation. So that was this B3 move, which is of course also very important. So knight C3, basically white is just asking question to the knight on D5, what does it want to do, and doesn't let us push the F5. We have to go knight B4. Normally we go for the knight to F4, but here it would allow white to go for the bishop E4 move, attacking the pawn. So now it's not allowing, because of course there we can immediately go for this. So A3, white is targeting us, and we are forced to take on D3, and basically here we can say that white is happy we took their light squared bishop, because it was stopping the whole queen side. But again, now queen is standing on D3 also, so it's still the development is stopped. But now we're happy because we can go for the F5 and challenge the knight on G5 with H6 pawn. In case of B4, which is attacking our knight, we can attack white's knight, and the idea is that if white is taking on A5, we can take on G5 and open the H file. But yeah, basically this position, and now we're at least slightly better. Queen comes to E2 with the idea of going to H5 if we go H6 and we're going to weak the light squares. But we go for it anyway, because after H6, queen G5, queen H5, we have king F8. So there is no checkmate, nothing. If knight goes to H3, we have C5 with the idea of bringing the knight to the key D4 square. In case of knight F3, we have E4 tempo. And so white has to go for B4, challenging our knight, so that it goes to, at least not to C6, but a bit more passive square, like knight B7. So if white is castling, we already have G6 here, attacking the queen, and already if white is going to take, then we will win the piece. So white has to react here, knight H3, going back. And now after knight D8, knight is getting remaneuvered, castle, and knight F7. Now we are ready to push on we are ready to push the G pawn. We have G5 idea, we have G6 idea, and our rook now is defended on H8, which is very important by the knight. Also, pawn on H4 is a bit loose, so yeah, we can grab it in a few moves. All right, that was the H4 move. So now we move to the knight comes, which the line where knight comes back to F3. This is like the main move, and that's what normally white wants to do, bringing knight back to F3. But there are many times ideas of pushing for E4. So that's why in this move, the whole idea of white's opening right now is just to stop the E4, which could have happened here, but of course it is not working. So now we are going for bishop d6. We're defending the pawn on e5 and also ready to castle and push for our f5 as we get used to it. So now knight c3, basically a rare line, but yeah, quite playable. Here, white wants to regroup the pieces, bringing the bishop to e2 and go for d6 and just develop the bishop as well, and also slow down this plan of the e4 later with the pawn on d3. So we go for castle. Now, if white castling, then we have already f5 with e4, and this line is transposes to the 11th move castle. So, sorry, to the 10th move castle, which we already. No, yeah, we already took a look at. No, we will take a look at. Sorry, in a moment we will take a look at that line. So bishop goes to e2. Now f5, and we are ready to go with e4. So d3 right on time. White is managing to stop it. Here queen c7 with the idea that after castle we already have some ideas to open up the diagonal. In case of the castle, knight c3, bc, and now e4, we're opening up, targeting the h2 square. If pawn takes, now knight has to move, knight g5, and now bishop f5. We don't really have to push so fast to take with a pawn h2, because if white would do something with a pawn, like playing h3 or g3, it would create a weakness, and then we could actually trap the knight on g5. So, for example, bishop g4 has to be played, so now we take on h2, for example, king goes away, now bishop e5, and yeah, we're having, again, like, okay, in this case, we're already not down material anymore, so we're having equal material, but we have very active pieces. Meanwhile, white's pieces also became more active, but the position generally is good. Also, king's position is weaker since we took the pawn. For the engine, it's okay, but I would say that it's still more comfortable to play with black than with white this position. So bishop e2, white is trying to defend the knight on c3, and also at the same time threatening to go for ideas of knight takes d5, looking at the knight on a5. So we go rook b8, and we are attacking the pawn on b3 to weaken the dark squares for white. If rook b1 is defending, then we go knight f6, not allowing any take. And after castle c5, and okay, again we are ready to bring our knights. Even already e4 was already possible, but it looks more. This move looks more unpleasant because we're just going for slow piece movement. We're not letting pieces get traded, and it's very tough for white to get so little space there. So yeah, it's pretty tough position, and for those two bishops. Case of b3, we have knight comes back to f6, and now basically if white is not castling, we can just go for the c5, knight c6, and d4 plan, which we said before. If castle happens, then we go for knight f6. In case of rook b2, then the problem is after knight a4, rook b8, c4, suddenly we're having issues because all our pieces somehow are getting under attack. Case of knight f6, there is c5, bishop b7, bishop a5 takes, and knight takes on e5 at the end of the line. This pawn is gone, and yeah, basically taking that pawn on e5 would bring a lot of advantage for white. So that's why we have to go for knight f4. But even there, after bishop takes, pawn takes, this is not something what we were planning to get. We wanted to have f and e pawns rushing and pushing f5, e4, and so on, but this is not something what we wanted to get. Like d4, and yeah, white's, I mean, like, we don't really have an extra pawn, but yeah, our position is so much worse here. That's why rook b2 is not good, but here we have to start with knight f6. Now we're preparing the push. Now e4 is a threat, and white has to react. King h1 was played, so that when later we push for e4, then we take on h2, and it's not going to be with a check. In case of rook b2, again, is still not good because of queen e1, and yeah, some issues with a knight on a5. This is a threat, and other knight jumps. So c5, now again, we're going for this knight c6 and knight d4 idea, and also after we remove the knight, we are threatening to take on b2 as well. And yeah, again, we are having a full compensation for the pawn in this position. So that was this knight c3 move. And now we're moving to this line which we were discussing. So castle, we're castling as well. And here, interestingly, there is a knight f4 move, which is actually more main move. But this one, the castle is the more aggressive move. Yeah, basically here, in this knight f4 line, black is taking on d3, and okay, there is a compensation because of the pawn structure for the pawn. But here, after castling, we still want to continue our plan with f5 and e4, just pushing the pawns. So let's say knight c3 is played, but it just allows f5 and e4 in the next move. If bishop e2, e4 is coming, knight d4, bishop e5, basically just attacking the knight move by move, just attacking it. Knight b3, now queen g4, bringing the queen to the king side, targeting the pawn on h2. g3, queen h3, and yeah, already there are threats of coming with a pawn to f4, with a knight to f4. And for example, after knight takes on a5, I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black. So of course we already looked a little bit. So there is f4 and a4 and knight f4, and knight f4 is actually winning. So if g8, then after bishop f4, then there is going to be checkmate in a couple of moves. And in case of bishop f3, then we have rook f6, and rook is coming to h6 with a checkmate on h2, really unstoppable. So that was bishop e2 line. So now we are going to look at knight to d5. Now we take on d5, and now we have this very massive center in the position. In case of bishop e2 here, so stopping the e4 fork, e4 is still coming, knight e4, and now f4. Now f3 is a huge threat which is coming. So f3, if white prevents like this, then black can very least win back the material, so the pawn, and we get much better position. So now queen b6, c3, and now knight c6. We can win back the pawn and just have a great position and already be crushing. So b4, the only move which is not losing. Knight b7. So the idea is that we want to get out from the fork with bishop b5. So yeah, that's better not to allow the tempo on knight on c6. So now bishop b5 has to be played. Now e4, we're attacking the knight. Bishop c6, trying to pin and like trade the pieces. So now take on e3, bishop d5. And white wants to give up us the piece for all the central pawns which we had. But here we go rook b8, and okay, looking at the position, okay, white has 3 pawns for our piece, but since the bishops are not really so, okay, bishop on d5 is super strong, but okay, bishop on c1 is not strong yet, and we have perspectives to go for example, queen to h4, bringing the knight to f7, and so on. So we can definitely have a lot of ideas here. So yeah, I would say still slightly better for black, even though compensation is definitely somewhere there for the piece. If white goes for bishop e2, is a little bit too risky to allow e4, because after e4, white knight has to go. Like if knight goes to d4, there is queen f6 with an attack on the knight c3. We have bishop h3 move. So now king is a little bit in trouble. So if gh, then queen f4, and we're crushing. If d3 is played here, trying to break our pawn, then we go for queen g6, and we're winning material after e3. And yeah, we can take an exchange, we can take on g3. There are many threats for white. So if knight goes back to e1, now we have again a lot of options, like how to continue, and many crazy lines. like also looking at the position, it's pretty funny that we have almost white has almost all pieces on the back rank. Like only one bishop is missing from h1, and that would be just, and all the pawns, almost all the pawns on the second rank. Yeah, that's what our compensation is meaning, yeah, in this position. So now, for example, if we would go for queen h4, which is probably a bit crazier line than queen c7. Queen c7 is what we recommend. So g3 can be played, queen h3, knight g2, f5. So if white goes for f4, then we have bishop c5, knight e3, and g5, and okay, we are attacking and slightly better. And in case white goes for d3, well, here it comes. We go for f4, immediately challenging white's king position. After pawn takes on e4, rook f6. We just don't care about this knight, because also we have ideas later to go for this or take. So, and also our rook is coming to h6 actually. So probably, yeah, taking is not actually good because the bishop is going to take our rook. So rook h6 is coming. Knight d2, now bishop c5. With the idea that this pawn cannot really move, and already threats of taking and taking everything can be there. So now g4 not allowing any take. Now bishop d6 coming back now with the same idea, also creating pressure on the h2 square. Knight f3 trying to defend whole position. Bishop takes g4. Now we're getting the pawn not back actually, but okay, one of the pawns we're getting back. Now knight g5, and the whole time knight is hanging. Yes, okay, now this one is also okay. It's not really hanging, by the way, but okay, this is definitely a threat. So now knight g5 attacking our queen, and here the funny part starts. We're not carrying out our queen, but we push f3. After knight takes on h2, we take the bishop, and here queen has to move away. We take the rook, so we take all the pieces. Queen d3, now bishop e2, g2, and now we go for rook f2 White finally takes our knight on d5, and after rook f2, we're having this funny position where basically we have rook and the knight for the queen, but we have this repetition and we kind of have a draw. But of course, a lot, like all this line, like any moment there could be some move which the opponent makes, and which is a mistake, and then the game continues differently. So yeah, pretty funny line. But okay, queen c7 is a bit more solid and provoking the weaknesses right now on the king side. So if h3 is played, then we can already sacrifice our piece, since after g takes h3 we have queen d7, and we're just going into the position. King cannot defend the pawn. There is knight f4, and yeah, very nice position. So if g3 is stopping the take on h2, then we play bishop h3. Now we use all the weak light squares. Now knight g2 and rook a to d1, and basically we keep a lot of pressure on the position of the king. We are ready to push with a pawn to f4, f3, and so on. So yeah, like also again looking at the position of white, like our pieces are all active and are all out. Okay, maybe besides this piece on a5. So we rather bring this knight at some moment out, like we can go for c5, bring in the knight somewhere. Definitely possible, but yeah, for now white's pieces are also has to be get out, otherwise that we are going to create a very important, very dangerous attack. So rook e1 is actually a main move here, so attacking the pawn on e5, and actually the main line goes like f5. And the point here is that there is this knight e5 and many interesting lines like queen f6 and so on. But these lines are going a bit too crazy and too far. So that's why I recommend to go here with bishop to g4. Pretty rare line. Basically, it's not a must to protect the pawn on e5. But yeah. But bishop g4 is very interesting. Okay, now we're pinning the knight, and we want to go f5 after that. So in case, for example, knight c3, it's pretty bad move, because now we can go for f5 just for free. Bishop e2, and now e4, knight d4, and knight f4. We're creating a lot of threats. We're bringing the knight close to the king, challenging, putting pressure on the g4 square. g2 square. In case of d3, we just take on g2 already, king g2 and queen h4, because there is an issue on h4. f4, white is trying to stop our bishop, but after en passant, knight f3 and queen h3, king f2, bishop c5, checking from all the sides, d4 and rook a comes to d8, pinning this piece. And yeah, there is just too much of a pressure against the king. We're just crushing white. Case bishop takes on g4, we're taking with the pawn and opening up the file for our rook. Again, we still have ideas of bringing the queen and sacrifice because we put enormous amount of pressure on white. In case of queen g4, then there is h5, attacking the queen, and queen has to go back. There is no good square for a queen in the position, so queen d1, and now queen g5, and again, a lot of quick squares, a lot of issues, and we are just crushing. So if knight takes on e4, we take on g2, creating a lot of weak squares. So if rook goes to a d1, f1, as white is not taking, we go with knight back to f4 and basically just continue attack, but without the pawn on g2. So very interesting. If king takes on g2, of course, we go with queen to h4. The threat is to take on f2 and h2 both. So now rook h1. Now we bring the other rook to e8. Of course, like anytime knight takes here, we're just checkmating. So knight goes back to g3, trying to stop this idea. Now knight c4, and basically our knight is coming to the f3 square. We're ready to kick the knight from d4 first, and then knight coming to f3, and yeah, basically, yeah, the the position of white's king is pretty sad. And okay, queen h3, knight f3 checkmates are incoming, so we are just winning. Bishop e2 is very strange, because normally if white went for rook e2, bishop's place is normally at f1 square, also defending the king side. So this is not really precise. So we go for e4, knight d4, and now f5. We're also defending the bishop and opening. Also, we're ready to open up the f file for the rook. So for example, after bishop g4, fg, queen g4, we play bishop c5, now c3, queen f6, and after rook f1, rook a to a8 with enormous amount of pressure on the king. White doesn't really have development on the queen side, like all pieces are standing, and we're just attacking, so a clearly better position for black. If knight goes to e6 for a fork, then we take on h2 with a tempo, king takes, queen h4 check, and after king g1, we enter with our rook to f6, h6 to threaten a checkmate, and yeah, it's like almost over, but white can try to defend. So, okay, here if d3 is played, there is already an e3, and yeah, just closing the bishop diagonal with the next move, rook h6 incoming. And in case of g3, we can play queen h3, now d3 again. Now bishop takes on e2, has to be played. Now knight g5, basically forces the queen trade. So here bishop d1, knight h3, we take on c2. Well, at the end of the line, we end up to have an pawn up, and yeah, just more active in the endgame. So for that, we should have an advantage for sure. That was bishop e2. So now bishop f1 is more in the style. So normally if rook comes to f1, then the rook comes to e1, then rook comes to f1. Okay, more in the style, but definitely very passive. So we go for f5 as we planned. d3, white is stopping our push, and now we go queen b6, attacking, or rather keeping an eye on pawn on b2, and also creating a threat of going for bishop c5 and targeting the pawn on f2. If knight goes to c3, yeah, basically it's just a bit strange, since white would rather put the pawn on c3 and then later go for the b4. So here we can already bring the rook to e8, and we can work on the b8 h2 diagonal and attack the king. So if knight goes to d2, looks a little bit more logical. Now we bring the rook again, threaten to go with the bishop to c5, attacking the king. Now c3 looks logical, but what happens if knight comes to c4 and attacks our queen? Well, then we take the knight, pawn takes. White traded, by the way, the knight, which was doing nothing for us, so that's kind of a big thing. And now bishop c5. So even though there was a pin on these pieces, we don't care. we give up the knight if white wants to take. So cd, bishop f2, and after king h1, e4, we are just going to recapture material, and yeah, we're most likely also taking the rook. So we're taking we're taking back the piece, and the attack is huge, and we're just crushing. In case of c3, white wants clearly to go for the b4, and next move knight c4 with this fork. So here we of course have to react. We either have to play dynamically something or remove our queen. So we go for dynamic play, e4 immediately, creating a big threat. So now de, bishop c5, intermediate move targeting f2. Rook e2 is the only way to defend, but now bishop takes f2 is possible, since after rook f2, we take the pawn on e4, and now there are a lot of pins here, a lot of issues. So if knight takes on e4, we take with the rook, and yeah, basically there is still a pin on the rook. There is a pin here. There is knight incoming in the position. Like, yeah, definitely full compensation for the pawn, even more, I would say, but computer says it's around equal, so maybe there is a way white can defend, but definitely very tough position for white. And in case of h3, which is by far the most logical move, so yeah, the thing is, if once white is allowing this f5 push, then h3 g4 is never going to be possible, so that's why h3 immediately makes a lot of sense. So the problem is here is after bishop goes to h5, unfortunately it will not really work, since after bishop f5, it's just, yeah, basically stopping our ideas of coming with f5, and yeah, just white can go for g4 in the next move and be just healthy pawn up and finish the development. So bishop takes f3, we must take. Queen takes. Okay, now we don't have issue with a pawn on e5. Now we can go for f5, e4 as usual. Bishop goes back to f1, not to get into the fork. e4, now queen has to move, again, all the way back to d1. Again, all the pieces are on the back rank. This is pretty funny, move 15, by the way. And now bishop c7, and we're ready to bring our queen to the d6 square and create attack. And okay, already some checkmate threats are there in the position. So bishop takes the pawn on f5, and okay, of course there is a threat already to check on e6. So we have to play queen e7. We're first of all preparing to go for g6, attacking the bishop and winning it, and secondly stopping the bishop e6 move. King goes to g4, that's very logical, but here queen g6 will not really work out because of the problem on f2. So bishop e6, now king h8. Now rook f1, but here there is knight f4 attacking the bishop. Bishop has to go all the way back, but after h5, queen has to go back again. And after queen f3, we have e4. And the point is that even white is taking the other pawn, we're going to bring the other piece in the game, the other rook, and our attack is just going to decide the game. Bishop is already out of the game on b3, and yeah, all our pieces are attacking the king. We're just going to checkmate white. Queen d3 is also not good because here we also have the same idea of queen f6, of building pressure on the f file. So bishop h7 and another check with the tempo. King goes to h8, rook f1, and now e4 again. And again, all the pieces are suddenly active and ready to attack the king. So for example, bishop c e4, we have knight f4, targeting the squares. We are ready to bring our queen to e5, checkmate on the h2 would be a threat, bring the other rook to the e file, while all the pieces of white are standing and doing nothing on the queen side. So queen h5 is with the idea to give up the bishop, with playing, because after g6, bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes. Now we play queen g7, creating a small little trick of taking the bishop on d6. The problem is if white is taking on d6, we go for knight f4, and there are already issues for white, since after g3, which is the only way to stop the check without losing material or much material, knight takes on h3, and if king goes to g2, we have rook f2 already, and okay, there is just a forced checkmate. In case of king coming to h1, we're taking on f2 with a check, king g2, and now queen g4. And okay, basically there are no checks for our king, and we are already having threatening some kind of a checkmate in a couple of moves. So pretty much unavoidable. So that was queen d6, so it's not working. Queen e6 is a bit more dubious. I mean, white rather have to go for the endgame. So king h7, now rook e4. The idea is to, of course, create a checkmate. So we go for knight f4 and target the pawn on g2. And eventually white will have to stop our attack. So if we bring the rooks and so on, white will have to stop our aggressive attack on the king by playing queen g4, and we will trade the queens and go into the endgame. That's why queen g7 has to be played here, going into endgame, king g7. We're getting very interesting positions. So first of all, looking at the position, we have a piece for 4 pawns, but the enormous amount of active pieces. We have a lead in the development, and our knights are also active and ready to jump and attack white's pawns. So for that reason, I would say that there is at least compensation. So let's see how the game could continue. For example, d3, white wants to finish the development. Bishop c5, attacking the pawn in f2. Bishop s3, defending. Knight takes, pawn takes. Rook a to b8, now attacking the other pawn. Now b3 is played, now knight b7. And basically now we want to bring the knight to f5 to target the pawn on e3. And yeah, somehow our pawns are located in a way that we can block the pawn. So these 3 pawns are very strange, yeah. So they're kind of blocking all this big amount of pawns, and this one we have to block. Okay, we have a king here. So yeah, it's pretty interesting, and definitely I would say that we should either back material, but we should be careful for not to let white to march too fast, too quickly, because if white is getting the passer, then it's going to be very tough to defend for us. That was queen h5. In case of queen e4, basically similar idea of taking on h7 with the bishop, but the difference is, of course, that queen is not on d3, and the square for d3 is available. So g6, now we're attacking the bishop, since, okay, we cannot later push for e4, so it doesn't make sense anymore to go for this line. So g6, attacking the bishop, now bishop g4, and now rook f4, attacking the queen, and queen has to go back, queen is 2 again. Now rook a to f8, putting pressure on the f2 square. With bishop f3, we already have rook f3, the sacrifice, pawn takes, and after knight f4, many issues for white again. Queen f1, the only way to defend. Now queen g5, check. King goes to h1, and now queen h5. And yeah, basically we're just crushing this position. Yeah, everything is falling apart. In case of f3 trying to defend, then basically just too much of a weakening of the dark squares, and yeah, somehow also feels like this bishop is almost gone. So rook g4, we are going for sacrifice of the exchange, and after knight f4, queen e4, knight h3, we're sacrificing so many pieces to open up the king, gh, and now queen h4. Now this pawn is falling. Rook f1, white is trying to create something against our king, but after bishop c5, yeah, the position is just falling apart, and yeah, for white, and we're just crushing here. And rook f1, white is trying to defend with the rook, which feels like the most solid way, but now there is h5 attacking the bishop. d3, white is attacking the rook. Now we go for e4, we just don't even care. Bishop takes, knight takes with a tempo on the queen. Queen e4, we take, and we take on g4. And basically we end up in the end game. We have 2 minor pieces for the rook. And let me try to count 3 pawns as I can see it right now. But white can also take the pawn on g4, but the pawns are pretty weak, and okay, at some moment we can target all these pawns, and we can get some pawns back. Definitely there are chances for both sides, for black and for white, but I would say for black more, because we are always having this piece activity, not as white has almost nothing, basically. So c4 is by far the best move for white, but it's very tough to find this. So only, I mean, unless you're playing nerves about this move, or I mean, coming up with this move over the board is very difficult. So yeah. So basically, the point is that white is just giving back the pawn and wants to finish the development. So we play g6 now. Now white takes on d5. We take on f5 with a rook, attacking the queen. If queen e4, we go for queen f7, attacking both d5 and f2. In case of knight c3 developing the piece and defending on d5 at the same time, we go for bishop c5, putting enormous amount of pressure on the pawn on f2, and after d4, we take the pawn, bishop e3, trading for a knight, and we at the end of the line we take on d5, and yeah, basically we have again the position where we are having equal material. We will have the knight on c4, the very strong and nice endgame. We'll have knight on c4 with which we'll attack the bishop. So yeah, definitely material equal, but I would say still there are some opportunities for us to attack, at least on the f file. So if pawn takes on d6, then if you are taking on f2, by the way, then there is a knight c3, and white is actually pretty solid. So we have to play rook f2 first, targeting the queen. The queen is very good on e4, so on e3 is going to be it's going to be some threat of bishop c5 at some moment. Also, rook comes to f8 now, trying to attack more. And now, since the queen is on e3, as I said, okay, at some moment there is some queen bishop c5, and bishop cannot go to e3 at the same time. So f3, white is trying to stop, but after e4, we're just opening up absolutely everything and just crushing. So rook goes to f1, the only way to try to defend, but after knight takes c6, knight c3, we're going for knight d4. I mean, the pieces are still super, super active, even though we don't have two pawns any longer on the d and e file, so we have very good position. Knight e4, white is trying to also create an attack. Now queen e6, we're defending also on d6. Knight takes, and we have a very nice move, knight c3, knight f3 check. The point is, if king h1, then we just take on d6 and we are just winning. But if white is taking on h3, then we are taking queen h3. And basically, in this position, white will have to give us perpetual check in order not to lose, since the rook h4 in checkmate is just unstoppable. So very interesting line, and okay, a bit crazy, I would say, but very interesting. So knight c3, developing the bishop. Now rook takes on f2, knight e4, attacking our bishop on d6 and the rook on f2. Now rook f1, king h2. Luckily, there is a pawn on a5 for white. So now we go back with the bishop to c8, and we have already ideas to bring the bishop to b6, and basically there is enough compensation for the pawns, and yeah, there are already some lines which are making draw. But okay, for example, b3 move, we can go for bishop b6 and create some issues for white. But let's say after d3, bishop b6, queen a2, bishop g1, king h1, bishop b3, already like repetition, because after rook h1, this is actually going to lose, because after knight c6, yeah, this pin is just unstoppable, and we're going just to win. And in case of king h2, bishop g1, and we are just repeating, and yeah, interesting way to make a draw. In case queen comes to e2, there we have e4 already, and basically here we have very nice attacking ideas. So after d3, white is trying to open everything up. Rook comes to f8. Bishop e3 in time to defend the pawn on f2. We take on d3, queen g4. Now queen e5, g3, and queen d5. So basically now we gained back our material, we gained back the pawn. We have the pawn on d3 also, let's not forget about that. And some pressure. But of course, like moves like knight c3 are coming, knight d2, and so on. So it's definitely not such an easy position. It's a bit complicated still. But I would say we already like transfer to the position where, since we have already equal material, is going to be easier for us. There will be no pressure on us to just attack or something like this, but now we can already play more solid, or just try to find some more solid moves. But definitely there is still pressure on f2, so it's and also on the king side, so it's not going to be so easy for white. In case of queen g4, this is actually the engine's top choice, and okay, it's like I don't know what should happen so that you get this in the real game, but yeah, in case it happens, then we take on d5, and well, after knight c3, queen f7, d3, white wants to develop the bishop, and here we go knight c6. The point here is that we cannot take on f2. The point is that knight can take on d5, and of course we cannot take the knight because the rook is hanging, so we have to play knight c6 here, and with our next move we just threaten to go like with the knight to b4, d4, bishop can come to c5, attacking the pawn on f2, so we have many ideas and many threats, and it's still a game, so yeah, definitely a big compensation for the pawn still, bringing the rook to f8 and so on, so yeah, definitely a great position and game and fight ahead. That was it in this chapter. Now I would like us to go through the key moments from the chapter and key moves. Let's start with with this position. So first of all, the bishop went back to a4. It's pretty dubious, and immediately you can see how fast black can get an advantage if white is just playing such strange move. So here h6, attacking the knight. Now e4, attacking the knight, and basically there are already no real good moves, so only queen e2. But yeah, after bishop e6, too many threats, and yeah, this is just getting more tough and tough in position. So just generally to point out that this is not how white's supposed to play this, and if white is not playing it well, then we're getting a winning position very quickly. So the other position is after the castle happened. Yeah, so it's again just to highlight. So in this position, white took already 2 pawns, and we can see that how much of the advantage in the development we received. We have a rook which always ready to jump to g6 to attack on the queen side. We have a bishop coming to b7, knight to c5, and so on. Like all the pieces are working. This is, according to computer, already objectively winning position for black. It's tough to stop all the moves. Like bishop will never be able to go here because of f4. So f4 is always a move, like bringing the bishop to c5 or to h4. I mean, it just depends what we want to do, but yeah, definitely f4, attacking and targeting the pawn on g2. That would be my first idea. Bringing the rook to g6, bishop to b7, target the g2 and push for f4. So tough position for white, and yeah, the pieces are still standing, and it's not so clear actually where to develop them. The next position happens after yeah, basically this idea, and it's just generally very often we can see this idea of removing the knight. It's not doesn't have to be always knight d5. Sometimes we have it the knight h7 and so on. So our idea is just to attack the knight, and if white knight comes to e4, we want to push with if knight comes to d4, we want to push with f5. Very important that the bishop is not on d6, so that knight cannot really take it. So, and knight goes to g3 and now e4, and so basically in this kind of lines, white can get very bad or even losing position very, very quickly. So they have to be really careful about what they're doing. So the next position is happening after the castle. So white is basically ignoring this whole threat of bishop g4, so we go for it. So just to remember that we have also this idea of bishop g4, and our bishop also from d6 is covering the square on g3, and yeah, in case, for example, queen g3, then this kind of positions we can get. And okay, if white is taking and a bit uncareful, then yeah, basically due to our development, we're just crushing this position and completely winning. Next position happened when we got this pawn structure of d5 and e5. Yeah, basically very strong center with both pawns controlling most of the squares. Bishop is still not out, but okay. And these pieces are always going to be a bit awkward. Also, knight on g5 is pretty awkward. So yeah, here, for example, if white is becoming even more greedy, like here we play, like, for example, bishop e7. just defending the pawn and attacking the knight. And okay, if knight f3, then already e5, e4. So yeah, pretty interesting how awkward the white pieces are. And in order to play correctly, they have always to put the pieces on the awkward squares and to reach the main lines. Enormously difficult for white. While we are actually playing very normal active moves and we have clear plan in these structures. Yeah, this position, again, pretty much similar idea. So here we normally want to take on e4 and to follow it up with f5. In this position, we cannot really do it because there are two threats targeting the pawn on e5 and the checkmate, so we cannot really do it. So that's why we just move the knight away. It doesn't really necessarily have to be always h7 square, but just moving the bishop away, moving the knight away, and the next move we just want to go for f5 and e4. So this is just as an idea. The next position is after b3 move. So yeah, basically the point here is that it's not so easy to develop for white. White is trying to go for the b3, and but the idea for us to go for is that we have f5 anyway. Even though the f5 is now being blocked, we can go for it anyway, because after bishop takes, we have rook f8, pinning this, and okay, even after white is sacrificing a piece, okay, we're getting into messy positions, but we are very active. We have extra piece, and okay, position of the white is, yeah, it's like white has a lot of pieces for a lot of pawns. Sorry for the piece, like, but actually now wait, we gave up a piece. Yeah, so we gave back the piece, and now we're just down 3 pawns. And the whole concept also of this chapter that material is like doesn't really matter since we have all this all the threats, even going like into the end game. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. The game actually, which was played, it ended in a draw, but yeah, I mean, it's very difficult because the game which ended in a draw is like correspondence chess, and you can imagine over the board it would be completely different. The next position happens after, yeah, basically this is the final position of this line. So we played bishop c7, just looking at the beautiful pieces on the first rank of white, like all the pieces on the first rank, almost all pawns on the second rank. So yeah, and we just have this enormous attack ongoing against the king with queen d6. So we removed bishop to c7. Now queen d6 is a threat, bringing the rook to e8, and yeah, just having a good time, good position, and good attack against the white's king. So that's it. Actually, yeah, that was the last position. So I hope you studied well today and it was useful for you. And I wish you good luck in the games. And I'm going to see you in the next chapter. Bye bye.